When you first create a web app in Azure, it gets a default URL based on the domain azurewebsites.net. For example, if you name your app Contoso, Azure automatically generates a URL like contoso.azurewebsites.net. While this works fine during development, it's not exactly ideal for a professional or customer-facing site. That's where custom domain names come in. A custom domain allows you to assign a friendly branded web address, something like contoso.com, to your Azure hosted web app. It replaces the generic Azure URL with something more trustworthy and recognizable to your users. When you use a custom domain for your web app, you create a branded and professional presence that reflects your identity. Instead of sending users to a generic address like myapp-12345.azurewebsites.net, you get to welcome them to something cleaner and more recognizable, like yourbrand.com. That small change instantly increases trust and credibility while giving you full control over DNS configurations and security, including the ability to bind HTTPS and SSL certificates for encrypted communication. Setting it all up is surprisingly simple. You will begin by reserving or buying a domain, something you can even do directly in the Azure portal without needing to visit a third-party registrar. Once you've got your domain, you'll configure DNS records to connect your domain to your Azure Web App. You can use an A record, which ties the domain directly to an IP address, or a KNAME record, which points the domain to your app's default Azure address like yourapp.azurewebsites.net. The KNAME is usually more flexible since it stays valid even if Azure changes the IP behind the scenes. Just keep in mind that not all domain registrars support KNAMEs at the root level. So if that's the case for you, you'll need to use an A record. After the DNS is configured, you'll head back into the Azure portal to validate and enable the domain. Azure will verify that your DNS setup is correct, and once confirmed, your users will start accessing your app via your custom domain. One thing to note, custom domain mapping requires your app to run on a paid app service plan. Free and shared tiers don't support it. To ensure smooth operations, test your domain configuration before going live, and don't forget to secure it with an SSL certificate. If you plan to use multiple subdomains or wildcards, take time to align your DNS and certificate approach. With just a few steps, you transform a default Azure URL into a meaningful, secure, and user-friendly entry point to your application. So, what's your key takeaway? Adding a custom domain to your Azure Web App isn't just about vanity. It's about professionalism, branding, and control. Azure makes it simple, whether you're starting from scratch or linking an existing domain. With just a few steps, you can elevate your app's credibility and ensure users access it through a trusted, familiar address. Let's get on the Azure portal and see where you can add custom domain. When you open the custom domain section of your app service, this is where you configure and manage your app's custom domain names. Instead of relying on the default Azure generated URL like yourapp.azurewebsites.net, this page lets you link your own domain name, something like yourbrand.com. At the top, you will see the public IP address of your app, which you can use when creating an A record if your domain registrar requires one. You'll also see a custom domain verification ID, which Azure uses to verify that you own the domain you're trying to bind. Once you've set up your DNS record, either an A or KNAME record, you can use the plus add custom domain button to associate that domain with your app. After validation, the domain will appear in the list with its status, like secured if it's active and bound correctly, If you are purchasing a new domain, Azure even gives you a shortcut. Just click plus buy app service domain to register one directly through the portal. This entire experience is designed to give you full control while keeping the process streamlined. Whether you're linking an existing domain or setting up a new one for your production web app,